Blessing is the editor-in-chief of ChurchMag, a resource for church tech, creativity, and thinking, as well as the digital product manager for Alpha International. It's great to see you, Blessing. And Chris Wilson is joining us as well. Chris is a senior writer and strategist at ChurchMag and is a marketing manager for an IT consultancy in Krakow, in Poland. It's really great to have you both with us today. How are you guys?
Hey, Matt. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having us. I'm great. I am hot at the moment in Cape Town.
You're in South Africa, right? I was going to say.
Yeah. So I needed to stay close to the beach. So it's very hot at the moment. I don't know how it is where you are.
Well, let's ask Chris. What's happening over in Poland? Is it pretty cold?
Right. It's +3 degrees Celsius today, so it's not too bad. But I do always find it funny how in the summertime, in my summer, it's always Blessing's winter. So whenever we record a podcast, like I'm in t-shirts, he's in like a hoodie, and today I'm in a hoodie and he's in a t-shirt complaining about how hot it is.
Guys, yeah. It's such a treat to have you both. Thank you for giving us some time today. I'm going to hand over to you. God bless you, and looking forward to what you have to say.
Yeah, well, it's been an amazing few days, I'm sure, for a lot of people. I haven't managed to catch all the sessions, but I'm hoping I can do the catch up, like as mentioned just before this talk. So Chris, I think I'm actually just going to let you intro this one.
Cool. Yeah. So we wanted to talk about social media because social media is constantly evolving, and it always will be. But there are some aspects of social media that often get overlooked or are underestimated. But these can have great impact on the work that we do in churches and in our ministries. So we've chosen like 4 things that we wanted to focus on in this talk. And like any good talk or speech from a pastor or in a church, they begin with the same letter. So the first thing that we want to look at is challenges with social media. So Blessing, over to you for the first one.
Yeah, just love it. You got to do it right. It's got to be the 4 C's.
Of course.
So the first thing that I want to just bring to our attention, which is what a lot of us know, is it's almost as if everyone has a megaphone. Back in the day, it was only few people who had amazing resources who could get their messages out to the masses. But now everyone has some sort of megaphone with social media. And that creates a lot of noise and can obscure some of the important things.
Yeah, and then connected to that, and which kind of plays into it, is the fact that we have more platforms than ever before. New ones seem to be coming along every day. Now, some of these, in fact, a lot of these don't stick around. Like, anyone remember Clubhouse? But there are others which look like they're here to stay, and in fact are growing even more, like TikTok. And each of these have their own kind of preference. So if we're trying to create content for each of these and trying to do it well, then that means that it's just an increasing amount of workload, an increasing amount of effort that people have to put in.
Yeah, and this leads us to talking about just how technology has improved means that more people create a higher quality content, and that can be a challenge in how the expectations of our audience or potential audience also is much higher in terms of production value.
Yeah, and then there's the aspect of privacy. So there have been a series of scandals over the last few years, from things like Cambridge Analytica to doxing, where people's private information is put online and they're harassed, or just a series of other ones as well. And so the issues of privacy are becoming more important to people. Some people are less willing to share about their own opinions or willing to share information about themselves. More people are hiding behind anonymous names and things like this. So we need to be aware of these privacy issues and how we are respecting people's privacy as well.
And there is a growing concern around mental health, just the impact of social media on our mental health is something that's really been a growing concern, and just the negative impact of it.
Yeah, and finally, the last challenge that we really wanted to focus on was polarization. And I don't think it's controversial to say that social media is driving us all to more extreme positions. In fact, Stephen Russell, in his talk for the Reef Lectures last year, highlighted how it's easier for an algorithm to change us to want more predictable content than it is to try and figure out the best content that would appeal to us as we are. And the most predictable content is actually the most polarized content. And this is why it encourages us to, while your YouTube feed may slowly start to include more extreme views, more extreme positions, one way or the other, and then that just creates this polarized rift within society and even within churches as well.
Whoa, that just creates just a little anxiety for me personally, because just the thought that an algorithm, could be shaping me in a particular way. But I think it'd be good for us to just dive into some ways we can mitigate some of these challenges or at the same time, or maybe we can even call them, potential positive alternatives.
Yeah, that's our next three that we selected were kind of the positive views, as we say. So the first one, which is actually a great contrast to that last one, is community. So we believe, community really is at the heart of the church, and that social media does present us with the opportunity to build the communities we've had, both richer communities together, and also to reach out into the communities that we are in, to expand that community so that we are bringing more people to become more Christ-like and inspire ourselves to acts of love.
I think about how reach, so it's like we can reach the world now. I remember the earlier days, people would just be like, yeah, now we can reach the world, we can talk to the entire world. That's true, but only to a certain extent. Social media presents us this allure that we can reach everybody. But in reality, we can't really reach everyone. And I don't think we should be trying to reach everyone. I don't think trying to reach everyone is a good strategy either. So one of the things that we need to think about is not just the metrics. When we look at our metrics and analytics, it's not just how many people have we reached, but it's who are the people that we're reaching and where are we taking them on the journey of faith as we engage them.
Yeah, and then building on that, we want to talk about engagement, because as counterintuitive as it sounds, focusing on richer relationships with smaller groups or even individuals actually can lead us to reaching more people. And that's because when we focus on the quality of our interactions, on the quality of service that we're giving to people, on how we're connecting with people, then that is much more attractive if those are of a higher quality than if they're just these simplistic, blasted messages that we're sending out to millions of people, which just disappear in the wind. So by focusing on individuals and small groups, we can actually end up reaching more people. And even if we don't end up reaching more people, we make a bigger difference in the lives of the people that we do reach. Yeah. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear the word engagement, some of the stuff that comes to my mind are like these simplistic quizzes or the kind of social media posts which are like, share your favorite Bible verse or something like that, to try and juice the algorithm. And I think that there are places for stuff like that, in the same way that there is a place for our kind of fun discussions during fellowship time and stuff like this. But we should also focus on having genuine and deep conversations about these controversial and difficult topics, which is something that people are really craving right now in a world where we can be worried about changing our opinions. We can be worried about voicing our opinions that we feel are unacceptable to people in the outside world. And so we can, if we focus on this engagement where we're having genuine conversations about difficult topics in a loving way, trying to disagree agreeably, while protecting people who have perhaps been harmed by some of these issues, then that is an opportunity for us to cross these polarized divides. But there are a lot of considerations to do with this, such as privacy and protecting those who are vulnerable. But this is the opportunity that the church should be stepping into. And in fact, as we were preparing for this talk, we thought about the verse in John 13:35, where he said that the world will recognize us by our love for one another, and that we can't have community without an element of unity. And so in a divided world, in this polarized world, increasingly polarized world, how can we as a church be using social media to help foster that community?
I like that idea that you cannot spell community without unity. But the other aspect that we want to just, I think that's a good thing to remember is when we think about community, also just think about, we're talking about social media, but think about community in the sense of the place that you exist in physically as well. This local, in the context of a church, think about the local church. I think I picked this up from Matt Hogg, so hopefully I'm attributing it correctly. But one of the things that he might have said in a conversation we had, I think it was him, he said something along the lines of, you cannot out-local the local church. And there is power where you are. I know that there's a lot that we can do online. In fact, I'm an advocate for doing lots of things online, but do not undermine the power of where you are physically as part of your social media strategy. So think about, particularly in a local church, if you're going to reach people online and connect with them offline too, your localness matters even more. So remember, you are not trying to reach everyone. So embrace being local. It's a good thing. In fact, speaking specifically to that particular community in your surround, again, leads to what Chris mentioned earlier, more effective communication.
Cool. So we didn't want this to just be like abstract ideas. We want to give some practical suggestions for how we can do this. So one of the first ones is to look at some of these managed and closed platforms and smaller, more intimate communities, rather than just using these massive social networks. I know that this is kind of adding another platform. So some of these examples of some of these could be messaging groups, closed and private Facebook groups, Slack groups, Discord channels, or even something like a game network, game server where you can have private discussions. You can hang out, play games there, depending on ChurchMag. We're quite a geeky gamer group, so we do enjoy having discussions about big issues while fighting creepers and stuff like this. But you can also plan content for these small groups where you're planning to have real discussions, discussing topics that come up in the church service. Now, you may have to consider how you're going to monitor these groups, how you're going to help support people in these groups, because there are topics which can be related to personal trauma or hurt. And so it's important to make sure that you have people on hand who are respecting privacy, who are reaching out to people who are showing that they're in need of support, and also just making sure that we do this disagreeing agreeably.
Yeah. I like I like the ChurchMag Minecraft server. I never know what I'm doing there, but I think the other thing that we can do is focus on making our messaging and our language more inclusive. Often I think one of the things that I've noticed that it is, let me put it this way. One of the things that I've noticed as being more effective is, particularly in a local church context, is speaking as part of the community that you exist in your messaging. So when you talk about what's happening in your estate or in your suburb or in your village, you're not, or your surround, you're not saying, look at what's happening out there. You say, hey, this is happening in our community. I think language matters, and so make your messaging a little more communal and not exclusive. Beware of content that creates a divide and not an invite into community. I just had to try that, pastor.
And our final kind of point, which I think reflects a lot of the ideas that we have here, is that social media isn't just for talking, it's also for listening.
Yeah.
And that we can learn so much, we can find out so much if listening is a part of our social media strategy. If we are keeping tracks on big people in the community and what they're up to, what are the issues that are going on that are affecting people in our local area, what are the discussions that are going on in our church, what are the topics that people are struggling with, are people struggling or are they doing well? What about the individuals who are struggling, even though perhaps the rest of the church is doing really well? So we need to have listening as part of our social media strategy. There's some software that can help with this for certain groups to help keep track of community hashtags and things like that. But also, it's just about making sure that we have this attitude of listening to people, not just preaching at them.
Yeah. So earphones and not just megaphones.
Earphones, there you go.
So I think the other thing that big idea we wanted to bring in, also starting with the same letter as so we've kind of touched on challenges, we've spoken about communication. I think a good third thing to talk about is collaboration. I can't remember what it was, Chris. You mentioned, I think at some point you tried to tell me what it was in Polish, but I forgot. But collaboration is how we make greater things. Looks like we're coming back again to this theme of unity. It snuck in there again. But to reach a diverse world, the world is diverse. The people in your community, in your church or organization are not monolithic. And to reach a diverse world, we need diverse voices. And I want to talk, and I think what I'd like to emphasize here is collaboration in the content creation perspective of your social media. There are people in our congregations who can speak to people whom others cannot, because they've walked the journey, they've had certain experiences. And then there are certain people who have better gifting than other people. And so I love what Peter, I think it was Peter who in 1 Peter 4, where he said, God has given all of us different gifts and we need to use them well to serve one another. So collaboration is one of the ways that we can invite other people within our churches, within our organizations, to actually create content that speaks better to our world than we would if everything dependent on us as individual creatives or a small core of creators. It's a challenge. I remember the challenge of trying to come up with fresh content all the time. And so one of the ways of going past those blocks is talking to other people and inviting them in the creation process. So there might be a graphic designer in your church who you could involve. There might be that person who always has amazing questions, or maybe and they could just help you just create better content. So yeah.
Yeah, and so that was kind of a perspective on internal collaboration, but we can also collaborate with those outside of our churches as well. And so this might be, churches that are part of our same network of churches. If we are, a denomination or maybe a looser fit affiliation, we can collaborate with those, share things that have worked well for us, share resources with them. If there are other churches in our local vicinity who we can perhaps collaborate with on a project, that's a great thing to do. Even if we are maybe not, all going to become one church together, we can still share, do joint events, things like this. And then there's also community clubs as well that we can collaborate with, so that we can, maybe they have a need, maybe we can serve them in that way. And maybe we can just highlight good things that organizations in our community are doing that are really kingdom building and reflecting the new creation that God wants here on earth as well. So yeah, and that's another example again of unity. But finally, let's do some practical points for this one as well.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the ways that I do you want to take the first one, Chris, or
sure,
or share an idea?
Why not? So one of the ideas we had was like giving people frameworks which they can use to create content to share. So we could give them a simple testimony framework which can help them to share their testimony with other people. Like an example, before I came to faith, I blank space encountered Jesus, blank space, how they encountered him. Though my life isn't perfect now, and then they can show how it's changed now. So that's a simple thing that many people in your church could use, could take, could then it provides them with something that could help them share their testimony, even if they weren't feeling confident or able to do that beforehand.
Yeah, I think I already alluded to some of this, is open source your creator, your content creation process. We have amazing tools on our phones, and some people are more skilled than others. So create assets and then release them to your church and say, you can remix this and share it, and they can personalize some of that. And that means they have better ownership of what's created. And there's a high likelihood that they would then share it on their own social media accounts or platforms. They reach an audience that might not necessarily be looking at your content as a church or an organization.
And then related to that, we mentioned about other churches, perhaps nearby, perhaps far afield. Don't view them as competitors, and don't just like watch them from a distance with envious eyes, but gain contact with them, connect with the people who are helping with social media there. Ask them what they're doing that they've seen that has been good, that has worked. Perhaps offer them, perhaps for if you see a church who's struggling with their strategy, if you've got good social media for your group, maybe you can offer a way to help them out as well. If they're a smaller church than you, bless. If you're bigger, maybe you can bless someone. If you're smaller, maybe you can ask for assistance.
I like that. We are called not to compete with each other, but to complement each other. I really like that, Chris. And then the other thing that I've seen that happens in church life is that we tend to create a ton of resources. Even in organizations, there's some campaigns that we do. And the thing is, once the sermon series is done, for 4 weeks, we've done the sermon series, and then the assets, graphics, videos, everything that was used to create the thing supporting that series just goes to die somewhere in a hard drive, in the church basement or the crypt, or somewhere in the cloud. It just sits there. But think about releasing some of that content to the wider church. It's another way of collaborating and saving kingdom hours and time. Release what you create. I mean, you're not going to use it again, or it's not likely you'll use it again. And even if you did, but what if you helped another church or organization that's making a difference by just releasing what you create?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So our final C is we used care. And so we were talking about the issue of mental health, and this is something which really has been growing for a long time, with these studies showing that negative uses of social media can have really bad impacts on people, and some groups are more at risk to the adverse effects of social media than others. And then also, I think all of us have seen with the pandemic and this kind of fully online life that most of us have been living, that's also exacerbated these challenges that have come along. So there are some aspects that we can help address these mental health issues. I think one of the most important ones is to be honest in what we're doing. I've seen a lot of churches who buy into this kind of Instagram perfect impression where every week has to be, basically a near revival, or revival started this week, God moved spectacularly, the sermon was life-changing, and the best ever every single week. But we all know that church isn't actually always like that. Sometimes the sermon falls a bit flat, or sometimes the worship leader's guitar strap breaks and everything goes a bit haywire for a while. And also sometimes we come to church and we don't feel the way that everyone around us seems to feel. We see everyone else seemingly engaging perfectly with God, but here we are, and we feel like, and that can just make us feel worse. So we need to be aware of, if we're trying to always present this like Instagram perfect impression and ignoring the people who are struggling and suffering within our congregations, that is just a terrible thing to do, which exacerbates those things, and is perhaps a reason that we're sometimes accused of hypocrisy in the church if we can't be honest about the struggles that people are going on with. So, there's nothing wrong with sharing about things like it was a powerful service if it was true, but we also need to be aware of people who are struggling with that, and we need to be sharing voices of people who have gone through struggles, and perhaps people who are also still going through struggles at the moment.
That is so good. That is so good. Then the other one that we need to, I don't know if you remember this phrase FOMO that was created, the fear of missing out. And it's actually interesting that even as we're talking about social media and, maybe we should be advocating for, social media some more, but maybe we need a little less social media, and allow people to experience the joy of missing out from what's happening online. And I think that every social media strategy, particularly for a community, I think it should to some extent consider taking people offline, and maybe try to think about moving those online connection to some sort of offline activity that allows people to just disconnect. Maybe it's a nature walk. It's a walk in nature that you do as a community or as a church, rather than just being on social media. So I think give permission to people to not always be on, and just somehow find other healthier ways of moving your congregation to more Christ-likeness and a more united and formed community.
Yeah, and the final point we want to talk about here in this topic, before we have some practical points, is about just connecting with the people who need connections. And this is actually a real strength of social media. In the past, it was very easy to hide in the background, and that can still happen with social media. But also, we now have channels where people can ask questions anonymously. If people need help, they can perhaps come forward for counseling, for assistance. Perhaps they can gain touch via anonymous contact forms that can help us that can help us know about issues that are going on in the lives of our church members. And then there's also people who, especially now with the pandemic, who aren't able to leave their houses, who aren't able to come to in-person meetings for whatever reason. And so social media provides us again with that opportunity to connect with those people and to have these conversations, to involve them in the church life in some way, even if it isn't quite the same as being there. Of course, that doesn't mean we can just leave them out there. If there is a way that we can have people go over and see them as well, that's a great thing to do, to have those rich experiences face to face. But in situations where that isn't possible, especially at the moment, then social media does provide another way.
Yeah, I am aware of our time, Chris. So maybe
I
don't know if we can breeze through this in the next 30 seconds. I think as part of caring, I think we need to use social media as a way to allow people to get help. I think you've already touched on the second one.
I think we've kind of gone through most of these points about just being aware of people who are vulnerable and need help, not claiming that everything was brilliant, sharing stories of people who have struggled and gone through it, sharing stories of people who are still going through it, rather than just as well as the stories of things are great, things are wonderful. So.
Yeah. I hope this has been helpful in some way. I think we're at the top of our time now, Chris. We've spoken about some of the challenges, which I think we should always be aware of in terms of just the platform itself. It's always a good thing to keep an eye out because it helps us understand, what is it that we need to be addressing or adjusting our strategy. An emphasis on community, the importance of collaboration, and just as we've said, just the importance of caring. Yeah, I think we'll sign off there and hope that there is some value that you got out of it. Thanks for having us.
Blessing, Chris. Thank you. Thank you so much for presenting today and sharing such wisdom and insights. Absolutely fabulous. Look, can you tell us where people might be able to connect with you and ChurchMag specifically?
Yeah. So, ChurchMag online, our web address is churchm.ag. So that's kind of like one of those Silicon Valley URLs. So churchm.ag, and everyone's social media at ChurchMag. And we've got a podcast. You can just search for the ChurchMag podcast, and you should be able to find us there. And yeah.
And ChurchMag has been amazing to be one of our partners for the event. And actually, we have the URL for the website in the top of the screen. There's a drop-down menu there you can click on and click through. So, to just give us a little headline for ChurchMag. What is the vision, the hope for ChurchMag?
To change the world. We want to come alongside the church in its mission, whatever, in its mission just throughout the world. And our primary focus is church tech. So we talk about how the church can leverage tech and social media and creativity in general in its mission. So we speak at in abstract terms, more philosophical, and at the same time, we also try to include content that's practical as well. Yeah.
It's great stuff. Thank you so much, Blessing and Chris. Really wonderful to have you today. Hope you have a great rest of the day in South Africa and in Poland.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Matt, and thanks everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Cool.